Good morning, and welcome to the 2022 Statewide Economic Summit. I'm Judi Terzotis, President and Publisher of the Advocate, Times-Picayune, and NOLA.com. Joining me today is Executive Editor Peter Kovacs. We'll be co-hosting a discussion with subject matter experts from across the state. This event would not be possible without the generous support from our sponsor, Entergy, Louisiana. Let's take a moment to learn more about them.
Working for Entergy means powering our community
and taking care of our environment.
I'm proud of that.
Entergy has one of the cleanest generating fleets in the country.
And we're becoming cleaner.
We're bringing renewable energy to the power grid.
We've added more clean solar power to our energy mix.
We're helping customers conserve energy
and preserve our environment.
This is our future.
So I'm doing everything I can.
Because together,
we power life.
I'll now turn it over to Peter Kovacs, our Executive Editor, to kick off today's panel. Peter.
Okay. Thank you, Judi, and thank all of you for joining us. We have a terrific panel today. We've been doing these events for, I want to say, 3 or 4 years now. We used to do them at the Manship Theater live, and more recently we've been doing them virtually. And every year we tell ourselves we'll do next year at the Manship Theater, and hopefully we will. Let me start by introducing our guests, many of whom have done these events with us before. Greg Bowser is president of the Louisiana Chemical Association, which represents more than 60 chemical manufacturing companies across our state. Lacey Merrick Conway is president of Latter & Blom, the largest independently owned real estate brokerage in the Gulf South, with offices in Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi. Philip May is president and CEO of Entergy Louisiana, an electric utility that serves more than 1 million customers in Louisiana. Don Pearson has been Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development since 2016. All of those guests have done these events before, but today we have a rookie celebrity. President William F. Tate IV is the freshly minted president of LSU, and we're glad to have you here today. We really appreciate you taking time out for us. I thought maybe as a way to start, maybe we would ask Secretary Pearson for his overview of the state's economy and the prospects for growth in 2022.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to my esteemed colleagues that have gathered here today to kind of share some information and join in an active conversation. Certainly, as we look over the horizon into 2022, and we're standing in it really right now as it is, it's an exciting time. And to really evaluate what we see going forward, we do well to take stock of where we stand today. And so one of the things that I would say is we want to continue this great momentum that we established in 2021, which is really quite remarkable. And I don't say remarkable lightly, in that we had to perform in terms of the state's economy, in terms of economic development, in very difficult circumstances during 2021. We had hoped that the pandemic had done its worst and was on the way out, and that proved to not be the case. We were once again in line to receive some very terrible storms. I'm sure Philip will talk more about some of the impacts that we suffered due to Laura, Ida, Delta, and others. But against that backdrop, we still had the best year for new job creation in Louisiana since Governor Edwards took office in 2016. Since 2016, over $74 billion in new investment in our state announced. But for 2021, a record year of $20 billion, representing 64 major economic development project wins in more than 31 parishes. That's almost 7,000 new direct jobs, over 11,000 indirect jobs, and nearly 10,000 retained jobs. we can't forget to keep what we have as important. Technology moving across all sectors means that businesses and industries have to keep up in order to continue to compete in the global economy. So we're going to continue to build on those strengths where we are, and in the energy sector, advanced manufacturing. We're going to have some strengths in logistics. We're going to have a background of a lot of new federal infrastructure dollars coming to Louisiana. But we stand strong in logistics. We all know there's a supply chain issue out there right now, but our ports and rail systems are integral to moving America's commodities. And so we have growth opportunities out there. The other thing I should mention is our focus, which has really ramped up significantly since 2016, on small businesses. Small businesses, 43% of U.S. GDP, that create 2/3 of the new jobs. So having an environment that supports growth and innovation for these small businesses is very important. I'm excited because we've made our application to the U.S. Treasury for some funds that were provided through the American Rescue Plan that are going to provide $74 million or more to us to put into the hands of small businesses, entrepreneurs, not only through our current programs such as venture capital investments and loan guarantee programs, but we'll roll out some new smaller micro lending programs, collateral substitute programs that are going to really help us build the important features of diversity being embraced in the economy, of a vibrant economy that's also established in a way that recognizes the importance of resilience. And all those are some things we want to talk about today.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe let's ask the first question of President Tate. Mr. President, you visited us over the summer, and when you did, you spoke about the role of university research, the university research plays in building local economies. And I was struck by it at the time, and I wonder if you could explain your vision for research at LSU and how LSU can play a role in lifting Louisiana from the bottom rung of so many indices.
Right, thank you. The thing people have to understand is universities are deeply embedded into the economic ecology of the state. First of all, to explain it, every dollar of research we bring in generates $3 of economic value for the state. And so you might ask, well, how does that happen? First, it happens through direct employment. We're one of the largest employers. About almost 3% of the folks who work in the state of Louisiana work for LSU. When we add our research capacity, we're adding jobs. That's direct. When you think about the human capital part of it, when we do great research, we attract really smart people. We have an upskilling of those individuals, and about $9 billion is generated every year from, over a life course for LSU graduates. It's really quite amazing. Then you think about it from a medical perspective. The fact that we have innovation related to medicine and the like, that makes for a healthier workforce. It also means we have more inventions. And if you think about American higher education, the big thing over the last 20 years or so, there have been almost 400,000 patents and new inventions that are created in higher ed. LSU is directly a part of that. That generates almost $600 billion a year towards the GDP. It's huge. LSU alone is contributing about close to $6 billion related to that in terms of our GDP. So wherever there's a university, it directly impacts the GDP. That's not including what happens with respect to attainment. So when more people are educated, it lowers healthcare costs. Less people are involved in social policy that requires them to be reimbursed in some way. The spillover effects are immense. And so what we want to focus on from an economic point of view are 5 areas. One, dealing with agriculture. And in particular, we want to be very, very strong in precision agriculture and the biotechnology related to that. Two, we would like to be very, very strong in cyber and military science. And we think that's the absolute future for what's going to be happening here in the state and across the country. Three, the ocean is extremely important, and coastal science research is vitally important for the protection of the state of Louisiana and its people. Four, energy is big here, and carbon capture and related research and innovation has to manifest itself at scale. And finally, in the area of cancer and cancer research, we believe that LSU should be central to advancing the National Cancer Institute designation so that people within the state have the very best cancer care possible. And we want to partner with our healthcare providers to do that. If we do that, we believe we're protecting the economic future of the state and will continue to add tremendous economic value.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that you mentioned when you were here over the summer was that the way Louisiana funds higher education doesn't really reward research. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, the state funding component.
Well, there isn't a designated investment in research per se. We fund the universities through a formula. The production function for the formula doesn't really account for research productivity. That's a disadvantage strategically relative to other states. If you think, I just took a team of folks here and colleagues, business folks here to the University of Georgia over the last couple of days to look at Georgia, and we're headed to the University of Kentucky in a few weeks. And the reason I'm doing that is to help them understand that these states have invested in their research and innovation at scale, and they're actually generating new jobs, creating innovation hubs, and really changing the calculus of the state at a much faster rate because they made a decision to invest in the research infrastructure. We don't do that here, not directly and not in ways that are purposeful. And I think that's problematic for the state. If you just took those 5 areas that I just described and imagine us making really significant investments in those areas, it would really change what was happening here and actually keep more people in the state to work, which is a big part of what we need to do. We've got to find a way to create business and innovation that keeps people here. Our long-standing industries, of course, do their part, but we have to create new industries in this kind of economy we have. And the way to do that is to invest and then to create opportunities for commercialization within the state. And I just right now think that is a real opportunity for us to move to another level.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let me ask the next question of Lacey Conway. The pandemic has brought about some significant changes in the housing marketplace. People working at home want more square footage. The Fed is driving down interest rates, which has made housing a more attractive investment. How has that changed the marketplace here in Louisiana?
Well, to start, I mean, it's changed the landscape pretty dramatically, and it's been very exciting for anybody in real estate, almost exhausting at times. To a brief recap of what we saw in 2021, really on a national level, it was the largest number of home sales in 15 years. We've never seen, even at a local level, sales at such a brisk pace. You know, we stories of sellers getting multiple offers, just really incredible, even up to 20 offers on one house. Homes being sold virtually, you know, people buying things sight unseen. Mortgage rates at an all-time low. You know, the average, I think, in 2021 was somewhere around 2.96. So the COVID impact, I mean, it pushed people to put the home at center stage. You know, the demands of what you want in a house changed. It became, you know, where you were teaching your kids school, where you worked out, where you did your job, you know, just pushing for that, whether it's more square footage or more outdoor space. The home dynamic saw a rapid change in 2021, and certainly for us in Louisiana.
Okay, thank you. If I could ask one follow-up question, you know, the pandemic will eventually end and inflation is casting a shadow. So like, are we, you know, at the tail end of an era of this?
I feel like as far as I think we've reached peak velocity of the market. I think for 2022, we'll certainly see home prices hopefully come down a bit. Interest rates are going to go up, Although even I think as of yesterday, a 30-year fixed was somewhere around 3.5%, which feels like, oh my gosh, the rates are going up, but still at 3.5, a very competitive rate. But it is pushing people almost to say, I want to make that move. I want to buy the house before they go up even more. So certainly inflation will have an impact on the housing market.
Okay. Well, I remember I moved to Louisiana from Alabama in 1984, and we moved to Slidell and bought a house and had a 13.5% mortgage. So you're a little young for that, but
Yes, but
hopefully
it's
we're not.
true. I think a lot of things just need to be put in perspective,
Yeah.
where certainly rates under 4% are really something to be excited about.
Yeah. Okay. Let's turn to Philip May. We've had 2 consecutive years of damaging storms, and maybe we're entering a new era where this is the norm. You know, supporters of the Biden infrastructure bill say that it will help pay to reinforce the power grid, but our reporting, which you were quoted in last month, suggests that Louisiana's share we're not going to have the federal government rebuilding our power grid for us, no matter how generous this bill is. So how can a poor state keep paying to rebuild its power lines?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Over the past 2 storm seasons, and that included a historic storm season with multiple storms in 20, and of course, major storm in 21, as well as an ice storm with that winter storm Uri that came in. Tremendous amount of damage. Louisiana, probably $4.5 billion of damage from all of those events. So a couple things associated with that. What we understand from those events is we believe the frequency and the intensity of such events are likely to increase over time. And so our view of how we need to upgrade our grid and so forth, improve the resiliency, the redundancy of the grid, needs to be moved at a faster pace. Now, that has to be done in concert with our regulators, with policymakers, and so forth. And we have to be thoughtful about our customers. We have 35,000 miles of distribution line. We have, roughly 6,000 miles of transmission. And so we have to be thoughtful about the cost to replace that. Now, since 2008, and following the storm seasons we had 2005, 2008, we adopted policies that put more resilient infrastructure into place. And what we learned from the storms, beginning with Laura in 20 and certainly followed through with 21, is that upgraded infrastructure fared very well during the storm. And in fact, when we added to replacing that infrastructure following Laura, when Delta came along, very little of that new infrastructure was damaged by Hurricane Delta. So we know how to build resilient infrastructure, but it is going to be a cost. So how do we go about paying for that? There's a couple of things. One is one way that Louisiana has used, and they were an innovator on this in the industry, is to use securitization, which essentially means that you get the lowest possible cost for paying for that. So the cost associated with this storm, we will file a case with our Public Service Commission. They will review, audit, and make sure that the costs that we incurred were prudent. And then when it's clearly determined that those costs were prudent, we would go out and securitize that at rates that will be even lower than those low mortgage rates that you mentioned. And by the way, my first mortgage was $13.75, so I feel your pain. But that will reduce the impact on our customers. We also have been lobbying our Congress for help for federal aid, because the situation we saw with Hurricane Ida alone is unprecedented. 30,000 poles were damaged or destroyed from Hurricane Ida alone. The closest precedent to that was when we saw in 2004 and 2005 in the Florida Peninsula. Those utilities experienced 7 different storms in those 2 seasons. FPL, which was in the target of many of those storms, over that 2 seasons only had 29,000. I say only 29, but to that point, there was nothing close to that in this industry. So it gives you a feel for the scope of the damage and the ferocity of these storms we're dealing with. So we'll go to Congress, we'll lobby on behalf of our customers to find dollars to help offset those costs that our customers are going to be paying. We also are filing grants for what is called a BRIC funds. BRICS is building resilient infrastructure and communities. And so what we're doing there is we have 7 projects, including transmission and distribution projects, in those areas that we think are at higher risk. So Jefferson Parish, St. Charles, Plaquemines, Lafourche, Calcasieu, areas that are longer and close that we can and do things like build water walls around our substations. So with rising water from that growing threat, they're more secure, improved infrastructure. Many of our lines that were built, decades ago were built on land that is now marsh or open water, moving those lines back away and so forth. And so we will utilize every avenue to help reduce those costs. But we built this system over 100 years. This is a 100-year-old company. And so replacing and rebuilding and improving that infrastructure will take time. And so we'll do it in a way that's thoughtful in terms of making sure that our customers do not have an undue burden associated with those costs. As you're probably aware, Louisiana's customers, nearly a third of those struggle to pay their bills. And so we don't want to put additional burdens while we're making the necessary improvements to our grid. We have made great progress, but it's a long road to go, and we'll do that accessing whatever sources of revenues and funds we can to mitigate the impact on our customers.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I guess the last question of the first round would go to Greg Bowser. Petrochemical plants are some of our biggest employers, and the people who work in them are highly skilled and usually pretty well paid. And you can't just find replacements for those people on the street. And so is your industry having a hard time keeping employees, which is something we hear about across the economy?
Thank you, Peter. Fortunately for us, we're not having a difficult time keeping employees. Where we're really seeing some concern for us is when you get to the contractors that come in and do the maintenance and do the upkeep and do those things. Those are our partners in this industry, and they're having trouble keeping people and making sure that they can get the amount of folks that they need to perform maintenance work. From a chemical perspective, we've been very fortunate in that throughout this whole pandemic, we didn't see a lot of infection rate. We didn't see a lot of people out with COVID. We were able to have folks social distance. We did some things in our facilities that helped. For example, we really limited who could come in and out of the facility. We had a rigorous testing going on constantly with all of our employees. And so that helped us to continue that. This new strain of virus that's out there is really giving us some concern because it's so highly contagious. It's causing some problems on what we want to do. Now, our contractors, as I mentioned earlier, they've seen a lot of people that have made different decisions. I mean, folks who have left the workplace have decided to work from home, to do different things. Some of them have decided that they want to move and want to live somewhere else because of family reasons. And so those are the things that we're seeing play out in our industry. So we hope that that this will continue. But from an industry perspective, we've been doing fine with our employees. We're now starting to feel some of the supply chain problems that other people are feeling. We've got to deal with that. So we think that's going to be more of a factor with the new virus and the supply chain issues. That's going to be more of a factor than anything else as we move forward.
Okay. I think with that, we'll let Judi handle the next round of questions.
Thanks, Peter. Lacey, we'll kind of stay on that same topic when it relates to home building. I mean, there certainly is demand for new homes. You articulated, people are looking at their home in a different way and what they need out of it. Right. But are there people to build those homes?
It's a good point. Good question. Oh, my goodness. We need more builders. And I think the demand is certainly there. And I think just like other industries, the cost of building has gone up, which, finding the land to buy at an appropriate rate, then adding your building costs, and finding a place. I know one thing that I did want to touch on impacting real estate for us, especially as we move to 2022, flood insurance rates. We have flood 2.0. So anyway, where you decide to build a new home is important. And one of the other pressures we have is, is it affordable? Is it in this range of, I'd say 350 and below that we are really needing? So home building, I think on a national level, home builders are out there, they're wanting to build, but certainly even at our local level, where is it going to be? How much does it cost? And we certainly need it.
Thanks, Lacey. Secretary Pearson, kind of staying on the whole employee recruiting. I mean, it used to be people in your position, you would lure employers, but now with remote working so prevalent and really practical, should we be luring more employees? And if so, what is your agency's role in that?
Well, certainly the topic of workforce, the quality of workforce, the availability of workforce has been the coin of the realm in economic development for a long time. We're pleased, very much so, that we, for 12 years running, have been recognized as having the best program in the nation with Fast Start. In another day in the past, workforce development was maybe teaching in a classroom or with a computer. Today, workforce development spans the relationship with K-12, moving through the technical college system, through the university system. It includes and is important that we do have very sophisticated artificial intelligence driven recruiting tools available so that we can match the jobs that are available in Louisiana in demand by either a new or existing company, and help find that talent pool and represent jobs in Louisiana, tech jobs, great jobs that are well paying. And that's going to continue to be a pressure, this competition for talent across the U.S. and the globe. And really, if you peel back the onion, what you want to do is grow your own talent. And that's another great feature that Louisiana economic development has embraced, is we've got great working partnerships with LSU, with Southern, with Louisiana Tech, Grambling, Xavier, UNO, you name it. We're on those campuses with programs, with dollars to invest in the latest training for whatever software that's needed by some of the players in our IT portfolio, whether that's IBM or GDIT or DXC, with all this alphabet soup, the companies that are out there. That same thing is true for the workforce needed to expand our LNG facilities, the advanced chemical manufacturing facilities. It cuts across all of those verticals. And I loved hearing the priorities designated by President Tate, cyber, the water management feature that we can grow in engineering and be strong in, the life sciences sector that we've got a lot of strength in, and we can talk about that being recognized at the federal level with a Build Back Better grant award recently. But those partnerships with the universities, those investments that are going to provide the talented, sophisticated workforce is going to determine winners and losers for nations, for states, for universities, for communities. It is of critical importance. Our partnerships in those areas are strong, and we want to continue to grow those.
We'll stay with Dr. Pearson for a minute, Secretary Pearson. Let me ask you a question on behalf of sorry, Secretary. Let me ask you a question on behalf of North Louisiana. We've been writing a lot about the deep population losses in those communities. What are the prospects for turning those around?
Well, the nice announcement there yesterday with AEP SWEPCO of a $100 million facility in the area. There's been some other recent announcements in the area. But let's step back from that, where we are enjoying some success. That's long overdue. It's not that we haven't been trying, but again, in these backdrop of pandemic and other things have made it difficult. Importantly, across America today, there's a lot of pressure on all the rural communities. And we've recognized this for a long time, and we've been very active in engaging what we can do to strengthen our rural communities. We've highlighted a number of rural economic development wins that we've had recently, some in that agriculture sector that President Tate mentions. When we take products from Louisiana in the agriculture area, we don't want to just load them onto barges and ship them off. We want to add value. And so these new sophisticated lumber mills have really given us a chance to do that. $100 million investments, but the ripple effect goes on with waste product that goes on to our pulp paper mills, the formation of DRAX, one example of a company that's taking wood waste out of the forest after harvest and translating that into wood pellets that are then railed to Baton Rouge, loaded onto international carriers, and go to the UK to provide renewable electricity there. Lots more can happen and is happening in our rural communities, but it doesn't fall off our radar. Importantly, and it was identified and amplified by the pandemic, they have to have broadband. Every community has to have broadband or they're just not going to survive. And why I say that is without the broadband access, telehealth is not possible. E-commerce is not possible. And the ways that it is so necessary for communities to move forward. So with broadband, even distance learning, a new feature linking new talent available to those residents in our rural communities is important. So we've had a lot of focus on this, and we will continue to do so. But this rural pressure is what's driving population loss in the Delta and some of the other rural communities around our state.
Thank you so much. The next question goes to President Tate. We actually received this question from one of our readers in New Orleans. What can we do to keep recent college graduates from moving to other states like Texas?
Well, first, and I think this, the last comments speak to it, you have to have universities embedded in communities. It's foundational. I just left Alexandria yesterday. They have a goal of having 5,000 students there at LSU Alexandria. The thing about that is if you're educated in the community, you're more likely to stay in that particular community. We do the same thing in Eunice. We embed medical schools in New Orleans and Shreveport because we want to train medical and health talent in those communities, and they're more likely to stay. I mean, that's a big part of what you have to do, but that's not enough because Texas is formidable. Houston and Dallas are our largest recipients of LSU graduates, if I'm not mistaken. We picked 5 areas that we call the Pentagon of what we want to do in the future for a reason. We picked coastal science, energy, cybersecurity, agriculture, and cancer because they're all deeply embedded in the context of what would protect and secure the economic future of Louisiana. And the hope is that we will be able to continue the partnerships that were delineated earlier, but also begin to create a creative class who is interested in establishing their own businesses here as well. So I believe it's extremely important that we take care of the human capital challenges for current industry, but also imagine new businesses that might manifest themselves that would attract graduates of LSU and the other universities in this state to stay here and to create businesses here in Louisiana. That also requires, and it may be above my pay grade, a large conversation about our tax features in this state. I won't go into it. I'll leave it to those of you who study economics directly, but I'll be real candid with you. When I was an undergraduate thinking about where I was going to live, it was very easy for me to take my first job in Dallas because I didn't have any concept that there were no state taxes and that there was an entrepreneurial framework for advancing business in that context. And I learned it really quickly and understood and appreciated it. And I think we have to think through some similar things here, along with doubling down on some things I talked about earlier. If we create that research infrastructure that allows for the development of the innovation hubs, which speak to commercialization and building jobs right here through people in their entrepreneurial capacities. That's something we really have to double down on and be really engaged business and industry and the universities along with government to make that a priority. That's how they're going to stay. It's a design. It's not an accident. I mentioned hope. Hope is the wrong frame. It's actually we have to design.
Thank you. Let's go to Philip May. Philip, The federal government is exploring leases for wind energy in the Gulf. How does that energy compare in terms of cost with the power we generate?
Well, so right now, wind in the Gulf of Mexico is quite a bit higher than the energy we can generate onshore with solar, with natural gas, with nuclear, and so forth. But that's going to change. If you look at who is developing wind in the US right now, Louisiana companies are key in that. And that's largely because the kinds of skills you need to do deep water exploring and so forth are the same skills you need to put platforms in the Gulf, place windmills in there, those sort of things. So while the economics of wind are not very attractive, offshore wind are not attractive off the coast of Louisiana right now, it's my anticipation that we will see it become economic by the end of this decade. If you look at wind patterns, the best wind in the Gulf of Mexico is far west Texas out towards Brownsville. And then as you move east, the wind fields decrease. So we're likely to see wind develop begin in that area where the wind fields are best and then move east. The other factor here is infrastructure. If you look at Louisiana, we have infrastructure right on the extreme southwest portion of the state. And when I say infrastructure, large transmission lines that are capable of moving that wind energy back into the rest of the state. And we also have significant infrastructure around Port Fourchon. So I would think that you'd have, towards the end of this decade, wind energy development that will make renewable energy available to our customers, kind of the end of the decade into 2035 and so forth. In the meantime, we are aggressively developing new renewable projects, primarily for solar, because solar is very economic right now. We have currently 55 megawatts of solar energy, along with other resources to give us roughly 700 megawatts of total renewable resources. 2 nuclear plants that have zero carbon output. One of those is 1,200 megawatts, the other 1,000 megawatts to provide us zero emission energy. And we just made an application to add 475 megawatts of renewable energy. The reason why we're focused on renewable energy is because we're hearing it from our customers. Our customers are telling us that they need to have lower sources of carbon. They're focused on 2 areas: Scope 1 emissions. Those are the emissions that they have at their site. And Scope 2 emissions are those things, for instance, from the use of electricity. We can help our customers address those Scope 2 emissions through these renewable energy sources. Solar is the path forward for that right now. Wind will be the path forward for that towards the end of this decade and beyond. And it will be complementary because solar, as you know, is primarily a resource that's only available in the day, whereas wind has a different availability, more at night and so forth. So that could complement each other and allow us to have that renewable resource around the clock as opposed to just during the day. But I see a great opportunity for the state of Louisiana from solar development, from wind development, complementing an energy infrastructure we have that is moving quickly to decarbonize. I see a great opportunity for the state. You know, as you mentioned, 75 billion, I think is the number you noted since Governor Edwards has taken to office. I see more opportunity ahead as this energy industry, chemical industry works to decarbonize. Louisiana will continue to be one of the most attractive places in the world to invest in those world scale projects for all the things that Secretary Pearson talked about: quality workforce, quality infrastructure, and low energy prices. But now with the added availability of zero carbon or low carbon energy, plus geologic infrastructure that allows us to do storage of carbon, hydrogen, and other important gas and so forth. So I see a bright future in Louisiana connected to the availability of renewable energy.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. Let's go to Greg Bowser. Greg, there's been a lull in petrochemical construction during the pandemic. Do you expect this will change this year or next?
We think it will change this year, probably the latter part of this year. A number of projects got moved from last year, got pushed into 2022. We think those things will come to fruition, but it's going to take a little while. And a big part of it, again, is going to be the supply chain issue. We have to make sure that you can get your supplies in. The other part of that is shipping cost has gone up unbelievable. You know, it's 3 to 4 times what it was prior to the pandemic. That's creating some issues. it's creating issues, one on what you pay to ship something somewhere, but the other one is the availability of containers. If you do container shipping, if you ship by container, you're having a difficult time getting containers in to put your goods in. So I think that we'll see some of the expansions happen. We think that Louisiana is primed for a lot of things, especially Philip mentioned decarbonizing. A number of our facilities are leading the way in reducing their emissions and taking carbon storage, for example. That's big for Louisiana. Louisiana has a chance to be a major player in the issue of carbon storage because of the way we do things and what we've done in the past. And so we look forward to that. And a number of our companies are driving that way. They've committed to go to zero carbon by 2030, some by 2050. And they're doing things right now that will allow them to get there. The big question is going to be technology and how much resources the state of Louisiana decides to put behind that effort.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Peter now for our next round of questions.
Okay, well, let's go back to Secretary Pearson. And this question comes from Mary in New Orleans. And she says, what can the state do to get people back into the workforce? And I guess I would add maybe to that, do you buy the Republican criticism that Democrats have distributed too much money and it's discouraging people from working?
A couple things to unpack there, and I'm happy to do it. It has been a tremendously difficult time for New Orleans, largely around the storm and the collapse of the infrastructure, but also equally as impactful is the way that the pandemic has impacted the hospitality industry. That was a thriving sector for New Orleans. Really, to some degree, the larger elements of the entire state are touched by tourism and the hospitality industry. I'm glad to see cruise ships now back at the Port of New Orleans and bringing people from outside of Louisiana here and helping support that economy. It's not yet to the point where we have the conferences. Jazz Fest, as you know, has been pushed. And so all of these things, the impact on Mardi Gras, have had an impact on the New Orleans economy. But what is happening and what is important is to understand this transition through technology and the jobs of the future, because the low-paying jobs are the jobs that are going to be swept away by technology. So identifying through your small business development center that's nearby, by identifying with your community college system what certificate programs are in demand that they're offering, and beginning to transition into a lot of medical jobs and other technology jobs, other jobs that are available that do have a longevity associated with them. We're going to need hospitality. There's no question about it. But it's going to be a while before we get back to pre-pandemic levels with that. Some very exciting things happening in New Orleans relative to life sciences. Pleased that we're in a partnership between Baton Rouge and New Orleans with a Build Back Better Phase 2 award application, talking about a health district that stretches from Baton Rouge, anchored here in Baton Rouge by Pennington, and anchored in New Orleans with 2 teaching hospitals and the New Orleans Bio Innovation Center that's there. And inclusive of this is all the rural communities between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But that's the overall strategy is for everyone in the workforce. Technology, new programs are going to be continually advanced, and we're all going to have to engage in lifetime learning.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's go maybe next to Greg Bowser. You know, one of the things that we hear from people in the petrochemical industry is that our big competitor is Texas. What do people in Texas, when they compete for investments, say about Louisiana? And you know, what do you then say to set them straight, shall we say?
One of the advantages that Texas has is that it's easier to get decisions made from Texas. We changed up our formula here in Louisiana. An industrial tax exemption is what I'm speaking of. We have more local involvement. It takes you a little longer to get it. The Commerce and Industry Board, they're not the final stop anymore. I think there needs to be local input. I think that is a good thing. We just have to figure out a way to put more certainty in the process. The other issue you have is we talked about workforce and people that you need to operate your facilities. Just by sheer numbers, Texas has an advantage. But I think Louisiana has an advantage because people here, I'm biased, but they're more passionate about what they do and how they get involved. The other thing that we have to do in Louisiana is we have to fix our infrastructure, because we're having a difficult time, not necessarily moving our goods and products, but moving our people around. And that's going to be important because one of the things that the pandemic has done is caused people to look at quality of life issues more closely. And if you're in Baton Rouge, for example, and if you work in West Baton Rouge, but you live in East Baton Rouge, you have a difficult time going back and forth. And so when we start to look at facilities we're going to expand and bring in engineers, these professionals take a long look at that and they say, they want to live in East Baton Rouge because LSU's here, Southern is here. These are the things where they do a lot of stuff, maybe families here, but they work in West Baton Rouge. And if you've ever tried to go from East to West Baton Rouge, somewhere around between 3 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it becomes a real problem. We have to fix those infrastructure things. Someone mentioned our tax structure. I think we need to take a look at that. We've got to be more competitive there. There's been several attempts to make us competitive from a tax perspective, but I think we need to do that. And that's the big thing. Quality of life issues for our employees, because that's what we've got to solve, that issue and the overall tax structure.
Okay, well, thank you. Let me go to Philip May. Entergy last year dropped some hints, maybe inadvertently, maybe not inadvertently, about moving its headquarters from New Orleans. How committed is the firm to New Orleans and to Louisiana in terms of its headquarters?
Yeah, so, with regard to that specific issue for Entergy New Orleans and so forth, I think they'd be in a better position to answer that. But Entergy is committed to Louisiana. This has been our home for 100 years, and I suspect it will continue to be. I think the demonstration of our commitment is the things we do in the community. For instance, last year, $9 million contributed out of shareholder funds to help our communities. And so a lot of that was focused on things like education. Half of those dollars focused on education. And it is a comprehensive approach, starting with early childhood education, so people are prepared to learn, focusing on things like City Year, Teach for America, and other programs that allow our primary and secondary schools to thrive, and partnering with our technical colleges, with our universities and so forth. We have great partnerships with UNO, with Southern University, with LSU, focusing on investing in those programs that allow our students to thrive, to stay in business, to stay in Louisiana, and support the kind of industries we need. Other examples of that, $5 million workforce development program that we put in place several years ago. A big chunk of that money was focused on Fast Start and Jump Start program. A good example of that is we put in place a certification for manufacturing in Northern Louisiana. Northern Louisiana, as Secretary Pearson has mentioned, there's lots of opportunities, lots of companies looking at that as a place to locate their business. But we need to make sure we have a quality workforce to do that. And that Fast Start, those Jump Start programs are a great way to get that done. We could locate a major manufacturing facility in Northern Louisiana. Think of the trajectory change that would have for the economic outcomes of the northern part of our state. It'd be incredible. We have to have qualified workforce to do that, and there are programs in place that we have been helping to fund that in conjunction partners with our technical colleges, with the Louisiana Economic Development and so forth. So our commitment to Louisiana is strong. It is comprehensive. It is focused on seeing this state thrive.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let me go to Lacey Conway. When we solicited questions from readers and with President Tate on, I thought we would get lots of questions about football. And as I mentioned, we didn't get many questions about football, but we got a lot of questions about crime.
Yes.
And what role does crime play? I think in your industry and in any community, you don't want crime being the thing that causes people to decide where to live, but you know, crime is passionately on people's minds right now, and what role does it play in real estate patterns and decisions that people make?
Peter, it's critical, it's crucial. I feel like everybody I know on this panel, anybody who lives in the region, feels like the crime is out of control. And I know we're addressing it, but it is, with all the festivals, with all the charm, with everything that we bring to people that want to live here, all that goes out of the window when people don't want to have a family here, don't feel good about, venturing out to go to a restaurant. I know, I'll quote, the great Michael Hecht from yesterday too, especially with New Orleans addressing the 3 Ps: potholes, public safety, and public schools. All of those play a role with trying to draw people to our region. If we have crime, if people don't feel safe, nobody wants to buy a house here. And we have to get it right if we're going to have a future for our region.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I guess for this round, I'd go to President Tate. Your predecessor believed in an admission practice that to some degree de-emphasized test scores and played up other factors. This was before you were in Louisiana, but I'm sure you've heard not everyone agreed. And I wonder, what do you think is right for LSU?
Well, this is a conversation about the economy, so let's talk about this from a capitalistic point of view.
Okay.
Higher education is in a market, and there are barriers to entry to the market. One of them is test score. Now, what's happening today? I don't think they would have known that today 1,800 colleges and universities are test optional. I don't know if they would have known that the 5 universities that are generally viewed in the American South as usually historically the premier ones, the public ones are Virginia and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Private is Duke, Emory, and Vanderbilt. I don't think anybody could have foreseen that those schools are now test optional. I don't think that anyone would have foreseen, or maybe they could have, I don't know, I wasn't here to decide, that the majority of the SEC right now, where we compete for students directly, because we all have comprehensive universities that offer all the amenities that you expect when you go to an undergraduate institution, including football and all the bells and whistles, that all those schools would now be test optional. I mean, the reality in the market is, if you have invested in the ACT or the SAT as a part of your stock portfolio, you're going to go belly up, because it's a bad investment right now. With those barriers to entry lowered, what ended up happening on the Common App, which is the way most people apply, is the last admission cycle, they had a record number of applicants. It was an 11% increase in the United States of America. More people became interested in actually applying to higher education. It's stark and stunning, actually. And point of fact, I don't think the market is going to go back. Now, I'm not a prophet, and if you invite me here next year, we can have a conversation. But I would be stunned if you see a retrenchment on this, as the demographic cliff of 18-year-olds is going to fall off, and the number of people who actually historically go to college is going to be fewer and fewer of those students. I can't imagine, from a capitalistic point of view, I'm not talking about equity and social justice stuff. I'm talking about pure markets. I can't imagine anybody would begin to put a barrier to entry up in light of the fact that the actual number of students who historically have gone to college is going to decrease. And when you think about the fact that more people have actually jumped into the market because that barrier to entry has been eliminated during the pandemic largely, it just doesn't seem like it will be sound business practice. I add that the other piece to this is, because this has been going on for several years now, the growth in test optional, that we're now going to be able to do far more intricate analytics around who we admit and in what ways we do it, and what are the best predictors over and above the test score option. So internally, we're actually very interested in understanding how well we predict. And, I don't want to make this crass because these are humans and we really care about them. But if you think about it as a production function, how effective are we as a production function in terms of really producing outstanding students who, by the way, which I didn't get a chance to mention in the earlier part, but I'll say right now, when we provide greater access, these students not only add value from an economic point of view, they're actually more inclined to engage in democratic practice as citizens. And I think that's a hugely important part of the deal. So I'm saying to you, just on this conversation about the economy, I think that the market has radically changed over the last 3 years, and I don't imagine it's going to go back.
No. Sort of relatedly, your predecessor believed in growing LSU's student population. I don't know if that's still going on or whether you've been around long enough to have an appreciation of what you think is the right size for LSU.
Well, what I would like to grow in this conversation about the economy is our ability to attract transformative graduate students who are the types of individuals who are going to be inventors, who are going to add value to our economic ecology because they're willing to take risk. They can and start companies. I want to bring in more people who are interested in commercialization and really innovating. I think the LSU has an opportunity in those 5 areas that I talked about to do that at scale and to do it in a way that I think would really make a big difference for who stays here and why they stay. That's a big part of what has to be emphasized in the future. In the past, it has been undergraduate enrollment. And let's be really frank about why that probably was happening, largely because of the de-investment in higher education. Enrollment became the ticket for actually generating revenue to keep these enterprises afloat. And so if we have a continued de-investment in higher education from state funding sources, then you will see a stark competition among institutions for people to attend because their sole source of revenue will be tuition. Yep. And this is what has been created with de-emphasis around higher education resources across the United States of America. My hope is we get to a point where we provide a reasonable subsidy for students in Louisiana to continue to come to places like LSU, and that we take advantage of the fact that we have outstanding research and we are able to bring in students from out of state who might pay a little bit more to subsidize those students who are in state because they're paying a little more to come here, and we can keep the institutions afloat that way. But we are headed to a demographic cliff that if people aren't preparing for in the next decade or so, they're going to be in big trouble.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we said that we would release everyone at 10 o'clock. So let me turn it over to Judi.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for our viewers today and also this panel for your really thoughtful discussion in this very important time. Again, thanks to Entergy Louisiana for sponsoring this event. And we hope that you'll support local journalism by subscribing to our products, the Times-Picayune, the Advocate, the Acadiana Advocate, and NOLA.com. Thanks for joining us.